U.S. stocks are tumbling for the second day. The Dow is already down 1,000 points after dropping almost 1,700 points yesterday. This comes amid President Trump's escalating trade war and despite a stronger than expected new jobs report just out this morning. Also affecting the markets this morning, retaliation from China. Beijing announced it's responding to the White House's sweeping tariffs with 34% new tariffs of its own against the United States. Let's go live right now to New York and CNN business and politics correspondent Vanessa Yurkevich, who's standing by. Vanessa, you're watching all of this. Break it down for us. First of all, start with the jobs report that came out this morning.
Yeah, well, this jobs report, better than expected jobs report, may have softened the opening on Wall Street just a little bit. But look at stocks right now. Look at where markets are really tumbling this morning as investors are pricing in really the worst case scenario, a trade war escalation. They are looking for some sense that the administration is willing to negotiate with countries. That does not seem to be the case. Investors telling me that their trust has been just completely eroded as this trade war escalates. As you mentioned, though, a bright spot, the jobs report, better than expected numbers in March. Hiring picked up 228,000. That's more than 100,000, or about 100,000 more than expected. And the unemployment rate ticking up to about 4.2%, just slightly from 4.1%. But really, as investors are telling me, this is ancient news at this point. This is looking backwards in March. Really, everything changed on April 2nd when President Trump announced these universal tariffs, and Wall Street was waiting for retaliation from major trading partners. And we heard from China just this morning a 34% tariff on all U.S. exports going into China. That's about $143 billion worth of goods every single year. Things like chemicals, computers, agriculture products, which I will note already have previous tariffs on them from 2018 during President Trump's first term, and also retaliatory tariffs that went into place in March. So an escalation on that front. You also see there that's going to impact transportation and oil and gas coming out of the United States. But worth noting, though, that we, the U.S., get a lot more from China than we send them. We get about $438 billion worth of goods every single year. And that now also, because of what President Trump put in place, has a 34% tariff on those goods. Economists agree, Wolf, that those prices, those increase in prices, will likely get passed down to us, the U.S. consumers.
As we prepare to chat about what the markets are doing, Donald Trump is actually on social media calling out China and saying that they played it wrong, quote, and that they panicked in response to his tariffs. But, you know, all of this obviously evident in the global stock markets, which have tanked since that China announcement just a couple of hours ago.
The message we just had from the President of the United States just goes to show there is a lot of ego involved, and you do question how far tit for tat goes. Looking at global markets, let's have a check-in. Dow Jones is down, I think it was 1,100 points so far today. It was down 1,600 yesterday. And we're seeing the steepest losses in stocks like Apple, Qualcomm, Tesla, Caterpillar, Nvidia. These are companies with big exposure to China. So you're starting to see some real pain for big American companies. And of course, that will impact portfolios for all sorts of investors and consumers, your average person in the United States. So we have the pain there. We're having steep losses in Europe as well. No retaliation from Europe yet. We're expecting to see more retaliation from other nations next week once all of this has been processed. But, you know, we saw Xetra DAX down around 4% before it came on air, FTSE 100, similar sort of levels, and the CAC. And that follows on from steep losses in Asia. So really another day of absolutely steep losses across the board.
And I think at times like these, when many are wondering what qualifies as a stock market crash, and are we getting anywhere close to that?
I was having this conversation with my team. When is it a plunge? When is it a tank? And when is it a crash? You'll be thrilled to know we're nowhere near a crash yet. We have been tiptoeing towards tank in some markets, for instance, the Xetra DAX and the FTSE MIB in Italy, which is down more than 5%. We're not at a crash yet. But you have to consider the losses we've also had, not just today and yesterday, but in recent weeks and recent months, as all the uncertainty, all the threats of tariffs has added up and really taken, you know, we're talking billions of dollars off stock markets. And looking at today, I had a note from Deutsche Bank that said the market is doing one thing: pricing in a global recession. And if this remains the way things are going, and if we see more retaliation, that is where we are headed.
Yeah, is there any way to avoid that at this point? Has the rot set in? Would there be anything that could reverse the markets in that direction at this point?
negotiation and
it too
the
late for
US
negotiation?
president backing down at
Okay.
this stage.
All right, Anna, thank you. Well, we have a panel of economists here to dissect this. CNN analyst Rana Foroohar is in New York, and economics professor Ha-Joon Chang joins us from London. Great to see you both. Rana, I want to go to you first because we were talking about Donald Trump being on social media there. Well, he's also been mentioning a couple of other things that I want to raise. He's been saying in the past now that his policies will never change and that this is a great time to get rich, richer than ever before. What do you make of those comments in this moment of chaos?
You know, there's two ways to look at this. The first way, and the scarier way, frankly, is that he's just shooting from the hip. There really is no global strategy here. And this is Donald Trump and his ego, as we've just spoken about. And I think that you can make a strong case about that. He doesn't, assuming there's no coup in the U.S., he doesn't have a chance to get reelected. And so he may be less concerned about global markets this time around and U.S. stock markets than he was before. It may be about power and ego. The other case, the more sort of there is a strategy here case, is that he really feels, and I know many on his team feel, that the global trading system has needed an overhaul for some time. He wants to move overall tariff rates that the U.S. puts on other countries versus what they put on us closer together. Of course, that's now all been thrown up because we're in a complete trade war. I don't think these numbers are going to last. I do think that there's going to be some horse trading, and there already is some horse trading behind the scenes. But it is what I can say is that I think there's now a very good chance of recession, in part because trust has been obliterated. I also think we're in unprecedented territory. This is the biggest shift potentially to the global economic system that we've seen in half a century.
Yeah, and on that point, Ha-Joon, that Rana was talking about, I mean, even if markets do recover a little bit, we do see these moves to negotiate. How irreparable is the damage that has been wreaked on economies globally at this stage?
Yes, last few days I've been trying to figure out whether there's some method in madness. I concluded that the method is wishful thinking. Because what is going on is that Mr. Trump thinks if he puts a tariff wall, foreign companies will first of all come and invest. They are not really going to do that on any significant scale because the U.S. industrial base has been run down for the last 4 decades, and you cannot rebuild it in a few years. Moreover, if they actually come in a major way, there'll be no tariff, so he cannot have his cake and eat it. As for American companies, they are not going to invest on any large scale because the American financial system in the last few decades have become really parasitic and has been working as a mechanism to suck out the profit from corporations. So in the last 25 years, 90 to 95% of corporate profits have been given to the shareholders in the form of excessively high dividends and stock buybacks. And American companies do not have money to invest. So unless he does something about the financial system as well, all this extra profit generated for American companies by tariffs will be just leaking out of the system. So I'm afraid that it's all based on wishful thinking. And most critically, in the last couple of days, the United States has basically given up on being a country based on the rule of law. South Korea, my native country, signed a free trade agreement with the United States about 15, 20 years ago. And now that we are getting 25% tariff. So now who's going to take American commitment seriously?
Yeah, in many ways, it's a realignment of world order that's happening here, Rana. And it was interesting to see China's Vice Commerce Minister come out earlier and say he wants to work with the EU to oppose protectionism, unilateral bullying. I mean, how expansive are the moves we're going to see here for realignment globally among trading blocs?
Huge. It's going to be huge. And this is it really is an opportunity for China. It's kind of, in some ways, it's China's game to lose now. And it'll be very interesting to see how Xi Jinping and how Beijing plays this. You know, I would be a little bit skeptical about whether you're going to see some kind of complete new alliance between China and Europe, because what's going to happen now is that a lot of cheap Chinese goods are going to flood into Europe because they can no longer flood into the US. And are the Europeans going to like that? No, they're not. So this is where you start to get into that cascading sense of, oh boy, you know, we really are in a global trade war here. Now, if the Chinese were to suddenly say, you know what, we're going to acknowledge that we've been dumping cheap steel, cheap EVs, you know, cheap solar panels onto the world. And guess what, Europe? We are going to cut a new and more productive paradigm with you. Well, that would be very interesting. And in that sense, then Donald Trump may have made Europe great again.